So tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about the Seder, about that part of the holiday. Instead of the halachot, which we've covered in the past, and instead of the holiday in general, a little bit more about the central issues that take place in the Seder night. We're going to speak about 7 areas: the Haggadah, the 4 cups, the matzah, the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus of Egypt, the characteristic that stands out in the Seder night, that of Cherut, of being independent. That part of the Haggadah talks about the 4 sons, and last but not least, the portion of the Haggadah that deals with the entire Jewish history, from the beginning until the end. So let's begin with Haggadah. Haggadah, as you know, is one of the most important parts of the Seder. By the way, anybody know why it's called a Seder? Everything is in order. What does it mean, everything is in order? There are many mitzvot that night. We don't want to just jumble them and do them out of order. There's not only an importance in performing the mitzvot, the various commandments that apply during that night, but there's also great significance in doing them in the right order. For example, the 4 kosot, the drink of you can't just take 4 cups of wine one after another. You don't fulfill the mitzvah that way. They have to be each one at its time. So Seder is because everything is mesudar, everything is according to a particular order that the mitzvot for that night are being done. One of those mitzvot is the Haggadah, is telling over the story, telling over everything actually, which is composed in the Haggadah. What is the idea behind the Haggadah? You will notice in the Haggadah that there is a tremendous emphasis on children. Chinuch HaYeladim, educating one's children, is central to Judaism. We say it in the Kriyat Shema. V'gata levinecha, the Torah says, on this day you should transmit the tradition to your child. On this day, on Pesach, because there are many questions to be asked, there are many things that are done. That is a time to give over. That is a time to teach, to educate your child as to what happened. This idea of transmitting, of giving over the tradition is very important, because if there's no continuity, then Chaz v'Shalom, the Jewish people would stop. There would be an interruption. There has to be continuity, and continuity is not only biologically what the Jewish people are commanded to reproduce, to be productive, to have children, but also to transmit over the tradition, what they've learned from father to son, and so on. So this is extremely important. As we're saying as in the Kriyat Shema, what are the words there? V'dibarta bam, right? V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam. Exactly, you should teach it to your children, and you should speak about it. Anyway, the importance of this communication between a father and son is not only significant education-wise, it's also important, generally speaking, in friendship-wise, emotionally-wise. It is very important that a father maintain a good kesher, have a good relationship with his child, because the better the relationship, the easier it is to transmit over. There was a very famous king, David HaMelech, who unfortunately did not do it properly with one of his children. Never did David rebuke him or have a long talk with him, because it was lacking that part of their relationship, the father to son, the rebuke, the teaching, the giving over, the being on top of him. In other words, he turned out not to be what his father would have wanted him to be. So that's a tremendous responsibility, because children are different, obviously, and each one has free will, and when they grow up they can make of themselves what they want. But the father has a tremendous responsibility. It's his duty, actually, to do as much as he can. And if a father develops a good relationship with his child, then the chances are that he will succeed, or the chances are better that he will succeed in giving over the masoret, the tradition. So a father wants to give over a lot of things to his child, not only money, right? He wants to share with him a lot of experience. But more important than anything else is the emunah, is the faith that we have handed down to us from all the generations behind us, before us. And that is what takes place also during the night of Pesach. A very important part of our tradition, a very important part of the emunah of Judaism is taking place. We want to emphasize this night, we want to spend time with them, that's why we want to make them stay up and ask questions and get involved, and that is the idea behind Haggadah. The best, of course, education that a father can give his son is when he himself is an example. The father just talks and talks and talks, and he does not practice what he preaches, then that's not going to be a good example. I may have told you this story, but it pays to repeat it again, of a very religious Jew that once approached a visiting rabbi from Israel. This happened in Lawrence, I think. Lawrence is outside of New York City, upscale neighborhood, and there are religious Jews there too. A religious Jew approaches this rabbi after the prayers are over. Rabbi, can you explain to me, why is it that my child came out so different from my friend's child? We're both religious. We both send our kids to religious schools. We both come and pray here. I mean, we're both just as observant. We're very similar. We have similar lives. Why is it that his boy, my friend's boy, chose after high school to go to yeshiva to further his learning, and my son, as soon as he was done with high school, decided to become a priest? I mean, very, very different. I mean, what did I do wrong? He asks the rabbi. So the rabbi is not a prophet, but he assumed what may have happened, and he says, "This is what I assume happened." He says, when your friends, when that other boy's father, your friend, used to get up in the morning, and his son would ask him, "Dad, where are you going?" He would say, "I'm going to pray to Hashem. Come with me." When that boy would see his father preparing for Shabbat, he said, "What are you doing?" "I'm getting ready for Shabbat." When that son would see his father building a sukkah, and the son would ask him, "Dad, what are you doing?" "I'm building a sukkah. Come and help me with this beautiful mitzvah." The son saw the beauty in Judaism. He saw how devoted his father was, and he continued to be as devoted as his father. But let's take a look at what may have happened in your house. When your son saw you waking up in the morning and he asked you, "Where are you going?" "I have to go to pray." When your son saw you preparing for Shabbat and he asked you, "What are you doing?" "I have to prepare for Shabbat." When your son saw you building a sukkah and he asked you, "What are you doing, Dad?" "I have to build the sukkah." When your son saw that you have to, and everything Judaism is have to, he decided he doesn't have to. You see how important the attitude makes a difference? A son, especially a boy, looks up to his dad. He wants to become like his father. Oy vavoy if a son does not want to be like his father. So people really miss out on this. They don't know. As much as all of us are busy, we must not forget that we have a tremendous influence on our children. They look up at us, and they understand quite a bit what's going on, and therefore it has an impact on their lives of what they make of themselves. That is also the idea of the Haggadah. This is an opportunity to discuss so many important issues to Judaism. We want to do a good job. That is why the Haggadah is stressed so much, and you don't rush through it. You take your time and you give over as much as you know, everybody according to his knowledge, of course, of what happened to our forefathers. That is the idea of Haggadah.
But if there was so much as important, he once said it's more than the Shama that comes.
Right, I just said that everybody has their own free will. Nevertheless, you need to do as much as you can as a parent, because you don't know what difference you will make. And believe me, everybody can make a difference. It may not make a difference when he's 20 or when he's 30, but when he's 65, he might look back and remember what his dad once taught him or what his grandfather once told him. It's what you teach and what you give away while they're young that will sink in and stay. So even though they let go of it, they will not abandon it. They will come back to it. At least good chance they will. So we are investing in them. They may not use it right away, but eventually it's in them. It's in their blood. They may awaken one day. The next idea that stands out on the Seder night is the Arba Kosot, the 4 cups of wine. There are many reasons what these 4 kosot represent, what they symbolize, but the plain interpretation of why we have 4 is Keneged Arba Leshonot Shel Geula. We have 4 languages, 4 words that describe the redemption from Mitzrayim. As the Torah says, Ve'otzeti etchem mitachat zivlot Mitzrayim, I will take you out from under the burden, the servitude of Egypt. Ve'itzalti etchem avodatam, and I will save you. In other words, completely take you out, remove you from the territory, from working for them. But the difference between the ve'otzeti and ve'itzalti is that ve'otzeti is that they are no longer slaves. They're no longer completely under the Egyptian authority. Ve'itzalti is to completely remove from there altogether. Ve'ga'alti etchem, and I will redeem you. Mizron etuya v'shvatim gedolim. In other words, I will perform all these miracles and redeem you. In other words, to redeem means to take out and to take for yourself. Hashem is taking us to Him. V'lakachti etchem li le'am, and you will be finally my nation with the receiving of the Torah. Obviously, that happens Matan Torah. So we have 4 leshonot of Geula, 4 languages of redemption, 4 stages of redemption. And in the same way we had 4 stages of redemption in Egypt, the rabbis tell us, if you want to have an idea of what very soon, what will be the redemption, the new redemption, just look back at Egypt and you will have an idea of what it will be, because they will resemble greatly. There will also be stages. And on this, Yechezkel Hanavi says, what will the stages be? The stages will be, Ve'otzeti min ha'amim, I will take you out from amongst the nations. What does it mean, take you out? There will be many lost Jews, many assimilated Jews. The 10 lost tribes, where most people do not know where they are. Ve'otzetim, I will take them out from wherever they are. That will be one stage. Ve'kibatztim min ha'aratzot, I will also gather them, as is happening right now before our eyes. There are 5 million Jews in Israel. There is already a big kibbutz there. Not a kibbutz in the sense of agriculture kibbutz. There's already a big gathering there. The next stage will be ve'aviotim el admatam, and I will bring them to their land. That's a separate stage, because even though there's a kibbutz, it's not completely ours. We don't have complete sovereignty over everything that belongs to us. And finally, and that is what we're waiting for imminently, ureitim el harei Israel, and I will oversee them, supervise them in the mountains of Israel. In other words, I will take care of them and I will provide for them. So, doesn't anybody have a question? We only have 4 kosot, 4 languages, 4 stages of redemption. Don't we have more? There are 5 kosot. The 5th kos is called kosot shel Elyahu Navi. So why don't we drink the 5th kos? So there's different explanations, but let me tell you the one that Or HaChaim HaKadosh says, that there's a 5th language, there's a 5th stage called Veheveti etchem el haaretz, and I will bring you to the land. Why isn't that considered another stage, just like the other 4? So the Or HaChaim HaKadosh says, because right before it says the words Veheveti etchem, it says V'yida'atem ki ani Hashem Elokechem. I will only bring those and only include those Jews in the redemption who, prior to the redemption, will recognize ki ani Hashem Elokechem. If they recognize, and this is what they want, they will be part of the redemption. How do we know this? Because this is exactly what happened in Egypt. Not everybody went out. Not everybody left Egypt. According to the Midrash, only 1/5 left. And the same will happen. Remember, the next redemption is very similar in just about almost every way. Very similar to the redemption from Egypt, and that unfortunately not everybody will be fortunate to come out and to go to Israel and to be part of the redemption. So this is an important condition, and that is why it's not included, because it only applies to V'yadatem Keni Hashem. Even the ones who did leave Egypt, did they all enter Israel? No. Many of them died in the desert. So you need a zechut to come to Eretz Yisrael. And the zechut for Mashiach is the same. It will apply only to those who V'yadatem Keni Hashem, who know that there is an Hashem, and of course who are observant and who follow the Torah and the mitzvot. Otherwise they're in trouble. There is one small difference between the redemption of Mitzrayim and the redemption of that's coming soon with Mashiach. Over there in Mitzrayim it was b'chipazon. It was quick, as we will soon see with the matzah. The next redemption, it says kilo b'chipazon teseu. You're not going to be leaving so quickly, which means several things. First of all, it means it's going to be a long galut, a long diaspora, and even when the time comes to redeem us, it will be in stages. It won't be boom, Kriyat Yam Suf, we're crossing the Atlantic and we're there. It's going to be in stages. People are going to move there in stages. Of course, if we would have been lucky and all of Am Yisrael would have followed the Torah Mitzvot, then we would have had the merit that it should be B'chipazon, B'nisim Gluyim, with open, obvious miracles. But now it's happening in stages and it's not so quick. However, there is one similarity which does make it somewhat of a chipazon, that the next Geulah will be Be'esech Hadat, the rabbis tell us. It will be when people will be distracted. They won't be thinking about it. People will be in the middle of their work, eating their lunch or doing their job, whatever it is. All of a sudden they'll hear Mashiach is here. In other words, there will be a certain aspect of chipazon in this. It will be all of a sudden. It will be suddenly. But the whole process will take time. And we're I don't want to say we're in the midst of it, we're at the end of it, as Hashem. It will be obvious. Right. Yeah, everybody will become obvious to it. You see, right now it's obvious. It is. But not to everybody. And Yeah, but not everybody's paying attention to these signs. That is why Shlomo Melech compares the process to the sun. The very beginning is like dawn. Only a little light is obvious. Then comes out sunset. It's a little bit more obvious. There's more light, right? And then he compares the third stage like the moon, that the light of the moon, which is brighter than sunrise. And I believe that's basically, approximately what he says. And the fourth stage is like the sun in broad daylight, when it will be obvious and clear to everybody, even to the non-Jews. So right now, we're sunrise, and maybe it's already coming out as clear as the moon. I would say so. It's as clear as the moon almost. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, that's why it's only as clear as the moon, because not everybody pays attention, right?
But all these things that are happening?
No, it's being directed by Hashem. Hashem directs everything. Mashiach is here. He just has to reveal himself.
Well,
Perform certain things to prove himself. Right, exactly. There's many Jews will move there before he comes. You don't want to be moved by him. You don't want to be the last one. You want to get front seats, right? In every generation, there is a Mashiach. No, every generation there is a real Mashiach. Now, in this generation, what do we feel more confident than in the past generation? Only because many of the signs are being fulfilled already. So we know that he is here. No, he will only know when he's told. Mashiach does not know that he's the Mashiach. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu. Remember, this redemption will be just like in Egypt. The Mashiach himself does not know that it's him.
Who will tell Elyahu?
Either Elyahu or Hashem, whatever. With these things we don't understand. We don't know in detail. All right? But anyway, that's what's represented here in the various stages of the Geulah in Mitzrayim, as well as in the coming redemption.
So how do we analyze it? How do we get also?
No, Moshe was only there where he was put temporary. This world is temporary, life is temporary. The ultimate goal is when Mashiach comes, Tchiyat HaMetim. At that point, Moshe Rabbeinu will be one of the first ones to come out in Tchiyat HaMetim. He will be from the very first. You see, Tchiyat HaMetim also will occur over 40 years. It will take 40 years for everybody to come back. The very first ones are the tzaddikim, and from the very first tzaddikim it will be Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech. They come along with Mashiach. They all go right there. That is our tradition. That they are the first ones that come. So he will come and he will enter Israel then. He was just stopped in the middle of the way. That's all. Okay, so that's the idea behind the 4 kosot, is to talk about, to celebrate the various stages, how each stage is meaningful. We talk about every stage, because remember, in the same way that it happened in Egypt, it's happening soon. So we want to communicate this point throughout the Seder. We basically communicate that point in the same way it was back then. That is how it will be soon. So it's not only remembering the past, it's knowing the past, because that will help us to understand the present. I don't want to say the future anymore. The present, in other words, what is happening right now. The 5th cup is, of course, the cup of Eliyahu Navi, because he will assist in the redemption, in the final stage of Veheveti etchem el haaretz, where everybody will come to the land, everybody who makes it. Because ultimately, if you get out but you don't get there, it's not right. It's not good enough. They're not lost. They just are not informed. Yeah, that's why we have a tremendous wave of Balei Teshuvah today. Hashem is making sure that those souls that are very special souls, that do not belong to the Erev Rav, who their parents or grandparents for some reason assimilated, that they will come back. And that is why we're seeing all of a sudden, in the past 20 to 25 years, a tremendous surge in Teshuvah. This is what some rabbis are calling the spirit of Eliyahu Navi here, is already here. His spirit, because his job will be, one of his jobs, to bring back the Jews back to their roots. So many Jews, B'ezrat Hashem, will do Teshuvah. Some of them, unfortunately, will do it when things get tough. Yeah. So that is why Hashem is not, that is, by the way, another reason why he's not hurrying up the whole thing. He wants more and more Jews to do Teshuvah. But anyway, these are the last days regardless. And that is why it's incumbent actually upon us, if we have any influence on anyone, is to tell him, in a nice way, in a way that he will understand that he needs to come back. Okay, so that is the 4 kosot. The next concept that stands out in the Pesach is matzah. During the time of the Bet HaMikdash, what stood out was the Korban Pesach too. And that is why during the time of the Bet HaMikdash, the matzah and the Korban Pesach and the maror was all eaten together, because they were all significant. Not that one was more than the other. Each one represented something else. Today we don't have Korban Pesach, but we have Zecher. That is why we have in the Ke'ara, on the tray, we will have all sorts of things that we put Zecher le Korban Chagiga, the egg, the Zeroa Zecher le Korban Pesach. We have various things, Zecher. Zecher means to remember, like a souvenir. So we remember what each one represents, even though we don't have a Bet HaMikdash today. We cannot bring the Korban Pesach. So we make a Zecher. But the matzah, nevertheless, is still around. It's a mitzvah. We covered that's one of the mitzvot on Pesach, which we already covered, the need to eat matzah, especially on this night. During the rest of the week, there's only a prohibition of eating chametz. You don't have to eat matzah, but you can't eat chametz. This night you need to eat matzah. And you want to make sure, by the way, that you have the right quantities, the right measurement of wine and matzah, and so you fulfill the mitzvah correctly. What is the idea of matzah? So matzah, you'll be surprised, it's not one idea, it's several ideas. First of all, what does the Torah call this holiday? Chag HaMatzot. So the Torah is telling us that what stands out, one of the things that stands out the most on this holiday is the matzah. Do we call it Chag HaMatzot? No. If you look at any Jewish calendar, any book, calls it Pesach. We call it Pesach, the Torah calls it Chag HaMatzot. Why? So Ron Rabbi explained as follows. Because we're praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what happened. When he went out to kill the firstborn, when he went out to punish the Egyptians, he spared our homes, he spared the Jews. Pasach means dileg. He skipped the Jewish home and he only went after the non-Jew, the Egyptian. So we're praising and we're thanking Hashem, and we're naming the holiday based on the miracle that we identify with. Hashem, on the other hand, is praising us, that we were so believing. Zacharti chesed neoraich. Hashem remembers that beautiful thing that we did when we went out to a desert, a barren place, with barely any food. Even the little dough that we had, it did not, lo yispeak abatzek, lachmitz. It did not have time to rise and to make real bread from it. So the matzah is a praise for Am Yisrael. Chag HaMatzot, praising the Jews, how they went willingly, quickly, and they didn't ask any questions, even though they didn't have any food or water. Believing and trusting in Hashem. So Hashem remembers this and calls this holiday Chag HaMatzot. To remember what? To remember that the Jews, the little batzek, the little dough that they did take with them, they ran out so quickly they didn't even allow it to rise, they didn't bake it normally. That is how quickly they ran, trusting. Chag HaMatzot therefore means trusting in Hashem, going out quickly, remembering the matzah, the little dough that did not even rise. So we're remembering that Hashem remembers here the speed and the emunah that we had in Him in going out so quickly. But elsewhere in the Torah, matzah has another name. Matzah has also a name of lechem oni. Lechem oni, meaning that this was the bread of the poor man. This is the bread that our forefathers ate in Egypt. So matzah therefore has another idea. Why do we eat matzah? Not only to remember when we left Egypt, that's significant, but also to recall what our forefathers ate. How during the time that they were enslaved, they gave them matzah. They didn't give them good food. They gave them very plain food. They ate plain food, matzah, which is the bread of a poor man. Why is matzah the bread of a poor man? First of all, it lasts a long time. I have matzah from last year. It's still good. Still good. Just put it in the oven and it becomes crispy again for a few minutes. Right? And you can get satisfied from it. It's cheap. It's cheaper. It's a poor man's bread. So we have the two ideas. Going out quickly out of Egypt, not having time for the bread to rise, and that it's called lechem oni. But obviously, as I said, Hashem remembers the matzah as the act of us going out quickly and trusting, and that is why we also relate to that during the Seder night. We have various matzot, not just one. There's different customs. Some have 3. The Gaon of Vilna had 2. In any event, we relate to the matzah. Even the afikoman, for example, is a matzah. Afikoman, which is instead of a korban pesach, which was eaten when we were already full and satisfied, just for the sake of the mitzvah itself, is now replaced with the matzah. So the matzah chaviva me'od. The matzah is very much liked. It's appreciated. It stands for so much during this holiday. Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim is a mitzvah. Mitzvah d'oraita. A lot of things, by the way, we say Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. Everything is a Zecher to Yetziat Mitzrayim, that we left Egypt. When we make Kiddush, We do all sorts of things. We say Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. Therefore, Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim is a mitzvah to remember when the Jews became an independent nation for the first time, to recall the miracles that led up to that independence, to recall what followed that independence, that we went to the desert, we spent there 40 years, to recall Matan Torah, to recall all of that. Everything is Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim because it started with Yetziat Mitzrayim. But during this night, which is when Yetziat Mitzrayim actually occurred, that is when we speak mostly about it. We talk about all the miracles in more detail. We don't just say Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. What's the significance of talking so much about Yetziat Mitzrayim? Because it happened so long ago. In order to be able to feel a little bit of what went on back then, in order to relate to the miracles. These are fantastic miracles. The parting of the Red Sea, the 10 plagues. I mean, even though there are plagues today too, I mean, people just don't understand what happened over there. In order to relate to the great miracles, to the great chesed, to the kindness of Hashem that He bestowed upon us, to all of that, we talk. We talk about it. We do all sorts of things. That brings out a little bit in us the feelings, as though, even though it's not the same, as though it would have happened to us too. In other words, we try to assume how it would have been if we would have been there. You know, how they enslaved our forefathers, how they made them eat this little food, and they worked them so hard. That is the maror, right? The bitter herbs. All of this, we try to a little bit experience what they experienced, and we talk about the miracles, bizra netuyah, with an outstretched hand. But there's another importance in talking about all these things. It's because in the same way Hashem performed this back then, He will perform it again. That is why we talk about it. We want to bring out this point that Hashem did not only do this once, He had done this continuously throughout Jewish history, and He continues to do it, and He will continue to do so. That is the importance of talking about the Nisim and Niflaot. And that is a time also to speak about your own personal miracles, your own personal experiences that you may have had. All of this, sharing it with who? With your children. Not only with your wife, but with your children. Let them know what happened. Let them know that there is Hashem. Let them be trusting as you are, as your grandfather were. It's not something that you're born with, bitachon. Emunah Hashem is not something that you're just born with. You have to learn it. You have to read about it, and then then you have to absorb it. A lot of people read about it and it just doesn't enter them. No, it's talking about it. Talking about the only place it says to remember is the Chol Masha Asa Lecha Amalek. That there is a mitzvah to remember. To remember. It's a remembrance. It's a remembrance. Yeah, you have to talk about it. You have to speak about it.
No, I'm not talking about Pesach.
Yeah. Yetziat Mitzrayim. Right.
Talking about on a daily basis. You went out every day. Actually.
Right. That's because that's part of the emunah.
But it's not.
It's not something by itself. Right. It's not by itself. It's part of the emunah that we're supposed to feel as though we left Egypt by ourselves. As though it happened to us today, as though we received the Torah today. We're supposed to have that feeling. Every day we're supposed to have that feeling as though we were the ones that received the Torah, not our forefathers. Because if that's what we think, I don't need to do it. Each one of us is responsible, because when they said Na'aseh v'nishma, they committed themselves for future generations as well.
As open as
always, all the 4 Israeli wars were open miracles. Well, it's very similar. The Scud missiles, I think, is a clear miracle. Even Mr. Rabin, who was not religious, said that it was a miracle. Miracles. So of course we don't have the parting of the Red Sea, but we have things that are very, very close to it. It's those who want to believe do not need too many miracles. Big miracles. Those who don't want to believe, even you give them all the miracles in the world, they will not believe. They'll explain it as some coincidence or nature. Low tide, as I said, with the Red Sea. Yeah, strong winds. Yeah.
Well, what about the Pope? Far enough contrast him with Pope. Is that kind of like a?
No. The Pope is an individual for himself. He's not a robot. He has his own ideas, his own feelings, and he just happens to be more subtle. You know, he's not so aggressive and so against. He has different feelings. Thank God. I mean, he's not indoctrinated with the poison that some of them were. So when you have, even though the teachings are against us, what they preach and what they say is not necessarily something that we agree with, nevertheless, he's a human being. And he has the free will, and depending on what nature he has by birth, he can turn out to be a good person, and that has been always throughout history. For example, in the Muslim world, Morocco and Iraq, the Jews did okay with the Muslims, depending on who the Sultan was. The Sultan was a nice guy, sympathetic. He realized that the Jews, because of the Jews, he's prospering. He wasn't a fanatic. Then they got along fine. The Sultan wasn't good, the whole population. Same thing with the Catholics. If the bishop got up, steered up the masses, they went crazy. So people are, can act according to, what they desire. They have free will. And he happens to be, apparently, he happens to be a kind person, an individual who's not an extremist, and who maybe even has a little bit of intelligence in realizing that others have made terrible mistakes. Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
You say like when Mashiach in the days when all of them would come and like,
right.
Jews like that get spiritual.
Right.
I thought maybe this is like on the way.
Could be. Yeah. Now you're talking on a spiritual level. If it has any significance, it could be that this is an indication of something yet to come. Yeah, maybe. Okay, Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim in the Haggadah is divided into various parts. Part of the talking about the miracles involves Hodaya, involves thanking Hashem. We used to do it with the Korban Chagiga. We used to do it with the Korban Pesach, which is for the Hatzalah, for having saved us. We do it on the night of Pesach by saying Hallel. Right? So Hallel is the Shevach and the praise and the Hodaya and the thanks for Kadosh Baruch Hu. That is part of the Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, which involves not just talking about it, but thanking Hashem for it. During the Haggadah, there's a part of the Haggadah that you say Hallel. There's different portions. Before the meal, after the meal. Part of the Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim also involves talking about Nekama. We talk about how the enemies did us all these terrible things. They afflicted us. They made us suffer, and we talk about that there will be retribution. Part of the Haggadah talks about retribution. You shouldn't think that they get away with it. Because Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, generally speaking, talks about the whole Hashgacha of Hashem. When we say Vehi she'amda lanu, we're talking about the entire supervision that has not only occurred in Mitzrayim, but throughout history Hashem has stood up for us. He has been guarding us. He has been protecting us. That is the other aspect, the aspect of Nekama, therefore. And then there's one more, which is smaller, and people do not realize what they're saying, but it's also very significant. That is the part that we sing Dayenu. Dayenu. All this Dayenu is very significant. A lot of people don't, they sing it, they say, they don't realize what they're saying. What we're saying is we're pointing out various things that Hashem gave us and did for us, that each one in itself is worthy of so much praise and thanks. Had Hashem only given us this and not that, it would have been sufficient. It would have been Dayenu. In other words, we're so indebted to Him. We need to appreciate everything that happened. It's not just the exodus of Egypt. From the exodus until we enter Eretz Israel, so many things that happened. It's not just one event. So many events, and each event deserves mention. Each event deserves mention, and each event is important. And for each event, we have to be thankful and grateful. If that alone, we would have gotten just that alone, that would have been sufficient. So part of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim is talking about not only the exodus itself, but about all the events that need to be talked about, that are important in themselves. Sufficient, enough. Had He only given us this, it would have been enough. To teach us to appreciate everything. Even if you only have this and you don't have everything else, it would have been enough. It's a tremendous lesson. Anyway, the idea behind Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, which the rabbis tell us, Kol hamarbe harei meshubach, that the more you say, the more you are praised. The reason for that is because it is a very powerful tool to instill, to imbue the emunah in us and in the children. Because why do I say in us? Because we say in Parashat Bo. In Parashat Bo, Hashem says, you know what will happen when you speak about this? ולמן תספר באוזני בנך ובן בנך את אשר התעללתי במצרים ותוצאותיי ששמתי בם. In order that you should tell your children and your grandchildren all that I have done in Egypt, all the wonders that I have made there. And when you talk about it, you know what will happen? Vida'atem keni Hashem. You yourself will be amazed. You yourself will be imbued with this emunah. It's not only your children. When you talk about it, when you start talking and telling a story, you're not only going to be affecting your children, you'll be affecting yourself. So Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim is significant that it not only communicates the bitachon, the emunah in Hashem, for all the miracles that have happened and that continue to happen, that supervision is continuing throughout all the generations, but also by you telling it, you will be inspired by it. That is why it's so important to read books, stories about tzaddikim, because we are inspired by their lives. That is the best Sefer Musar, the best book you could read that will teach you ethics, teach you good character, is to read the life story of a tzaddik, a biography of a tzaddik, because you yourself will be inspired. So this is important for the children, it's also important for the adults. But by the adult taking the initiative, the step of telling the story, just by telling it, he will be inspired by it. Unless he has a heart of stone, I guess. But if you do the Pesach correctly, if you sing, good meal, you have guests, you don't do it just by yourself. And you talk about what has happened, your personal experiences maybe, because personal experiences I'm sure everybody has. This brings out, this awakens people to realize that Hashem is behind everything. Okay, the next concept that stands out in the Seder is the Cherut, the independence. What's independence? Well, some people think independence means that if they had all the money in the world, they can spend as much as they want. That would make them independent. Some people call independence if they work for themselves and they don't have to work for a boss. Some people call that independence. Other people call independence, I guess, when they're an independent country, an independent nation. People call different things independence. The rabbis tell us, Elecha ben chorin ela mi she'osek b'Torah. True independence is only one who studies Torah. Why is that? Because even if you had all the independence you can think of, you have all the money in the world, you work for yourself, independent nation, you're still subject to your mazal. Mazal is something that everybody has. He's subject to it. If the mazal is good, he'll do good. If the mazal is not good, no matter how much money you have, you lose it or something will happen, they'll take it away from you. Human beings are subject to a mazal, to the fate, to the destiny. Whatever that fate or destiny is. If it's good, then even if he was washing windows yesterday, he'll win the lottery. Something will happen. Even if you have millions of dollars, if his mazal is bad, he'll lose it. Again, everything is mazal. A person who learns Torah, a Jew, who follows the mitzvot, he enables himself to overpower the mazal. He can be above the mazal. So he becomes really free. He's not subject, he's liberated. That is one of the ideas of what true independence means. However, on Pesach, when we talk about independence, we mean something else. We're not talking so much about the mazal. We're talking about neither about the independence from Egypt. Because we were slaves under Egypt back then, today we're slaves in other countries too. Maybe they're not making us eat matzah, right? But they're still making us pay taxes, right? We're not completely independent today. B'nai Chorin, that we emphasize during the Pesach night, is that we were liberated from the chains, from the shackles of Tum'ah. We were in the 49th level of Tum'ah. We were enslaved by the Tum'ah. God forbid, if a person falls into the 50th level, he just cannot make it, cannot come out of it. So we were liberated from the Tum'ah, and of course that happens in several steps, by coming out of Egypt and by receiving the Torah. Just coming out of Egypt was not enough. It was receiving the Torah that we became truly B'nai Chorin. That is what the rabbis meant. Ben Chorin Osek B'Torah is because he liberates himself from Tum'ah. A lot of people on the street today are in chains. They're shackled by the Tum'ah. The only way they can liberate themselves is by studying Torah. They can get away from all these temptations, which enslave. They enslave too. Temptations enslave you. What is a drug addict? He's enslaved by drugs. Smoking too. All these addictions enslave a person. To liberate oneself from all these temptations, from all these addictions, from all these things out there that we call Tum'ah, one needs to study Torah. So during Pesach, we emphasize being liberated from the Tum'ah. We emphasize the fact that the whole idea of the exodus of Egypt was not that we can be just free men, go on a picnic. No, we left Egypt, Hashem took us out on condition that we get the Torah. So that is the Ben Chorin that we're talking about, is that the Ben Chorin that we left Egypt and we immediately assumed the role of a Jew, of accepting the Torah mitzvot. So no one should think for a moment that Ben Chorin means no yoke, no burden of mitzvot, Khalila. Even though that's a burden, it's called an ol, but that burden of Torah mitzvot is what makes us free. It's what makes us be considered the children of the king, B'nai Melachim. The son of a king is treated a lot differently than anybody else, right? So we are the children of Hashem. By having that status, we're considered Bnei Chorin compared to everybody else. That is one idea of Bnei Chorin. Another idea is because we were considered poor, we were considered downtrodden people in Egypt, and even in the Galut, especially in Eastern Europe before the war, the Jews were poor, persecuted. On Pesach, what happens, the Jew is reminded, don't feel bad about your temporary status amongst the Goyim. In reality, ata ben chorin, you're really a free man. Be proud of who you are. Be happy you're a Jew. You say every morning, Shelo asani goy. You know who you are? Ata ben chorin. This is what a Jew is reminded on Pesach, even though he may be poor and he has a very simple seudah meal and a seder. Why should he be happy about? He left Egypt? He can't relate to that. No. Ata ben chorin. In reality, there's something that you should be happy about. You should be proud of. That despite your poverty, that's temporary. That's not as important as who you really are. You are ben chorina. You are a free man because of who, or the nation you belong to. That in itself makes you a free man.
You said we're 49th level.
Right.
But we learned, like in last week's portion before, about how to cleanse himself. And like, of course, in the morning we wake up, a certain ritual about pouring water to the tumah.
Right.
How did the Jews get rid of the 49 levels?
By receiving the Torah.
All levels were...
Little by little. They first received mitzvot, Shabbat, they were circumcised, even though most of them were later circumcised when they entered Israel. But nevertheless, little by little, by eating the man, all of that cleansed them. Yeah, the mitzvot and the man, all of that cleansed them. Okay, let's just see the last two concepts. Another concept that stands out in the Haggadah is the Arba'a Banim, the 4 children. Why do we talk about 4 children? Because the Torah addresses children differently. There's various languages used in the Torah depending on the child. As we said before, communicating with the children, educating them is important. But why does this stand out in the Haggadah Shel Pesach so much? It's not only because the children are so involved, it's because of something else. A lot of the problems that occurred in Egypt, a lot of the trouble, a lot of the persecution, a lot of the murder, affected who? Affected the children. The boys were thrown into the water. The boys were slaughtered. The children suffered a lot, especially the boys. So we bring this out a little bit to remind us of something very, very important. And that is, children are the future. And Paro knew this. Paro was trying to stop the Jew by eliminating its future, by eliminating the seed. It's not only because the Mashiach was going to be a boy amongst the Jews. There's more to that. Try to control them. Try to control the birth rate. Children are the future, and what that means is that even though you see an adult who's already 60 years old, it may be difficult for him to change, no matter how much you tell him and how much you speak to him, how much you teach him. He will change according to his pace. Invest in the children. Because the children, you always have a better chance that something will come out of them. So even if the father did not do everything properly and correctly, don't worry about it. Don't give up. Invest in the children. That is what is happening today. We're trying, everybody in Israel here, to gear up all the efforts and invest in the young generation because they still have a chance of producing good fruit. So that stands out, and there's 4 types of children that stand out. One is a Chacham, one is a Rasha, one is a Tam, and one is an Eyodeh Lishol. Chacham is the wise child, the intelligent boy. What we're being told in the Haggadah is, if you notice that he's intelligent, then act accordingly. Feed him. Teach him everything there is to know. Invest in him intellectually. Give him as much as you can. Don't spare anything from him. What if he's a Rasha? If he's wicked? Wicked doesn't necessarily mean a wicked man. He was talking about a boy. He's rebellious. He doesn't want to. He doesn't believe it. He doesn't care. That kind of attitude. Don't give up either. Akhei shinav. What does akhei shinav mean? You have to speak to him in such a way that he will feel guilty. If you would have been there, you wouldn't have been redeemed with such an attitude. You don't deserve it. In other words, we have to respond. What this means, what the Haggadah is telling us, is that if there is a Rasha, God forbid, if there's such a rebellious child, you have to deal with it. You just can't forget him. You can't ignore him. You still have to deal with him. How do you deal with him? Strongly. You don't give in. You don't make psharot. You don't give in. Concessions. However, the rabbis always tell us a rule about dealing with the
the ones that we're dealing with harshly. Small dochavi min mekarevet. If you push him away with the left, you bring him back with the right. Don't throw him away completely. Deal with him harshly. Deal with him properly, aggressively, if you have to. Don't make concessions. If he's a rasha, you have to give it to him. But don't give up hope either. There's still a chance that he will come back. Tam, let me finish with. Tam is a simpleton. He doesn't ask too many questions. He doesn't know too much. He's not that wise. He's a simpleton. But he's involved. He learns. He still learns. Go with him according to his pace. Don't demand too much of him. What should you emphasize? Emphasize the emunah. Tell him, Ki bezroa netuya Hashem motzi otanu. Emphasize the emunah. Tell him about the miracles. Everything according to the level. You want to educate the child according to his level. And with the tam, emphasize the emunah. Don't teach him all these halachot like you're teaching the chacham. And finally, we have eno yodea lish'ol. Eno yodea lish'ol does not ask questions. Either he doesn't know how to ask, either he doesn't know how to ask. These are the Jews that are almost lost. They're so distant that they don't know that they're Jewish almost. Barely. You want at-ptach-lo. What does it mean, at-ptach-lo? You have to start. You have to initiate. You can't wait for them because he doesn't ask. Because he doesn't ask, you have the one. You have to be the one to introduce him. And if you do so, you have a chance of bringing him back. So these are 4 ways of dealing with 4 types, and there may be more types, but they're all in between. The idea is Pesach. We try to bring in everybody as much as possible, to be me'ached everybody, to unite everybody, because ultimately that is our strength of being a united people. And because our children are our future, we can't afford losing one. Because if physically they're lost, then believe me that it's not as bad as if they would be spiritually lost. Because spiritually lost means that they are lost and their children are lost and complete generations are lost. Somebody is physically dead, then his child could still be something. Invest in the children. That is the idea of the 4 banim. And finally, we have the other idea that stands out through a portion of the Haggadah at least, and that's the ishtalshelut of the Historia, the whole history of the Jewish people, how it began and how it's going on. We talk about it. We talk about it from the beginning till the end. The reason to talk about this is because of what we say in the Haggadah, Baruch Shomer Avtachato LiYisrael. Blessed be Hashem who keeps his promise to the Jewish people. And that is, he said he will redeem him, and he redeemed them. The Jews were told in Egypt to be prepared. Na'alechem beraglechem, to have your shoes on your feet. Maklechem biyadchem, to have the stick in your hands. Because you're going to come out. What is required from every Jew during this generation after Yetziat Mitzrayim is to have the same attitude, to be prepared, to have a suitcase ready to go to Israel, because Mashiach is coming. The Jews have to demonstrate that they are prepared and that they're willing to go to receive the Mashiach. And they have to do one more thing, which our forefathers did in Egypt. Our forefathers in Egypt, tza'akul Hashem. They called out to Hashem, even though they called out from the hardship. They still called out. We need to call out. We need to demand, and we need to ask for Mashiach to come. And last but not least, the prophet promises that there is going to be one big difference between the last redemption and the coming redemption. This last redemption was from Egypt, and everybody celebrates the Exodus from Egypt. But this one will be different in the following way. Days are coming, nobody will celebrate Hashem, Hashem, the great Hashem who took us out of Egypt, who took out the Jewish people from Egypt. What will we celebrate? We will celebrate the fact that Hashem will bring out all the Jews from the northern countries, from America, from all the countries in the world, where he scattered them. I will bring them back and restore them to their land, which I gave to their forefathers. There will be no more Yetziat Mitzrayim, no more Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. From now on, this holiday will be called Zecher Yetziat America. Yes, that's what he says. Mi Eretz Safon, no more Eretz Mitzrayim. This is what we need to emphasize on the Seder night. Not only talk about Mitzrayim, not only talk about that redemption, but talk about also the imminent redemption, which B'ezrat Hashem, all of us will hopefully see very soon. Okay, that I think covered a little bit of the Haggadah, a little bit of what happens in the Seder night. And the more we talk about it, the more we're into it, hopefully the stronger we will be, and the more ready we will be to receive the Mashiach. Because as I said before, it's going to be almost a repetition. Just the names will change. How do they say that everything is the same, just the names have been changed? Well, just the names have been changed. Yeah. Otherwise, we will see an outstretched hand again. And there will be a Mashiach just like there was a Moshe. There will be a leader who will take us out from this country. Some of us will go willingly on our own. We will not wait. But some of them will have to be pulled out of this comfortable place, unfortunately. Well, we have to be, of course, feel bad for those who won't make it. And we have to reach out to them as well. There are 4 children all over the place. And that is one of our obligations. And especially if you're a father or a mother, then the more so that you have to at least begin with your own children. Because as we said before, the children are the future. No matter how much a person was able to accomplish in his life, there's only so much he can do. But to invest in his children, it's limitless. Because nobody knows how great the neshama of his child is. He could become a giant. He can become a leader amongst the Jews. And that is why Jewish education was always important to us. And that is something that we stress on the Haggadah in this night. On that day in Pesach, when you spend time with your child talking about all the miracles, make sure you instill in him this emunah, this faith. Okay, any more questions? Yes.
The true Mashiach is from Shevet Yehuda.